Hi, it's Cans here from Hey Sweet Art, and today we are just going to do a quick run through to get you started on your Wing & Shimmer project pack. The project pack comes with a series of templates, a color reference sheet, and a Harvest Moon Watercolour dot card. Additionally, you'll need a selection of matte colors. For the workshop itself, we just use the Prime Art range, but you can use what you have on hand. And then a varied size selection of brushes. So we've got a size 0, a size 2, and a size 6. So I'm just quickly going through what's in the project pack. We have a demo sheet and then obviously a selection of insects. So 2 dragonflies, 2 butterflies, and then the 2 beetles. And obviously, let's not forget the beautiful Harvest Moon metallic watercolors. To get started, I'm just going to put a drop of water on each of the metallic pigments just so that it can activate. They're not quite like watercolors where you can go to it with a damp brush and it already gets activated. You do need to just let that drop of water sit on your metallics so that they can settle into the pigment and loosen it up a bit. And then I'm just going to use some of the leftover paint from a workshop that I just ran this weekend on the same. And I'm working with a green and a blue to go through the demonstration with you. So I'm mixing a wash color of green, and what that means is basically a higher ratio of water. I want to obviously go through each of these exercises with you. The first one is our flat wash, and that just means a flat wash of color. So no strokes, just a nice flat smooth surface. It is usually the initial layer in a painting, so we do go lighter rather than full concentration. And if you look at my brush strokes, I'm also being quite fluid. I'm not going back into my painting. I'm not working in small brush strokes. I'm just keeping it nice and fluid, working in sort of one direction. And now I'm just finishing off by neatening up the edges. You should see now that it's already a nice clean flat wash. I'll leave that to dry, and there should be no residual marks or stroke marks in it. For this next one, I'm going to mix a second color, so I'm just going to use the blue in this palette that I have on me. Again, just mixing a wash color. So for the next beetle, we refer to it as a gradient wash, what we're going to be doing in the next exercise, and that's basically where we change colors midway. So as a starting point, I'm going to work left to right, and I'm just going to paint in my first color from the left to the right, long fluid brush strokes. There was a bit of residual pigment on my brush, so that was that strong blue line that came through, but I've just worked it back into my painting. Then gonna pick up my second color and just pull that in from about halfway, so there is an overlap. If you watch that again, you'll see that I've painted 2/3 of the way across, and then from halfway reintroduced that second color. I'm going to do the same exercise again, this time working top to bottom, and again just using those fluid brush strokes, working down the page. I'm not going to go back too much. I was just collecting that pool of watercolor there. I've worked 2/3 of the way down, and I'm going to reintroduce the second color. And the consistency again is quite a wash color, it's not too dark. And this is also consistent between the 2 layers. So I'm going to show you another exercise where it might not be as obvious, or rather as gentle a bloom. So I'm going to go in with a stronger pigment now, and then introduce my second color, also a stronger pigment. And you'll see that instead of like a gradual shift or a soft shift, there's now a stronger line between the 2 colors. So why I keep stressing the long fluid brush strokes, I'm just going to show you with another exercise. When I am painting, especially a wash layer, when you want to get as quick coverage as possible. Painting in these short brush strokes is not efficient, and it also so I kind of call it like coloring in painting, but yeah, it just leaves it quite patchy and doesn't dry as smoothly as it would if you were using your wash strokes, like long fluid brush strokes. I also find what a lot of my students then do, because it's patchy, they want to go back and then rework it. So they'll go back in, and then we're just starting to make a bad situation worse. Okay, we're going to move on to our wet on wet exercises now, and our metallics should also have activated enough. My first layer is going to be a clean layer of water into the first beetle. So our wet surface is going to be just water, and I'm going to use on the first half the pre-mixed paint that I've made with the matte color. You should see a sheen of water covering that's like, if you hold it up to the light, you can see a nice sheen of water. It shouldn't be a puddle or a pool. And I'm just going in with my first half, and you'll see that the color just gently softens out to the edges. I'm now going to pick up a bit of the metallic, and I like to just use the same card as a bit of a palette, so activate it and then decant onto the paper. This specific color blooms quite nicely because the pigment molecules are a bit smaller, but you'll see with some of the other metallics, they have a bigger pigment molecule where it's a bit glittery. So sometimes you'll notice a natural granulation, which can be quite effective. Onto the next wet on wet, we're going to paint a layer of paint as our wet layer. So this is just to show you the different kinds of effects that you can get. And then into this wet surface, I'll add in my metallic watercolors that I want to, and again, just to see the effect that it will give me when I put it into a wet surface. While we are looking at it, I want to show you the difference between wet on wet and then wet on dry. So everything in the top three that we had done was all a wet on dry technique because we were painting onto the dry paper. But once you let that paint dry, the wet on dry technique is applicable when you're painting over that dried surface. So here you can see there are no blooms. The paint is more controlled. So this is obviously the layers where you would add in your fine detail. So when your paint is all dry and you want to get stuck into detail, the wet on dry technique is obviously the one that you would reach for. Okay, onto lifting. This is just to show you that there is a bit of redemption, and lifting is as much a part of the process as painting watercolor onto your page, because of the fact that with watercolor you can't really go back and go over things with lighter colors because watercolor is a transparent medium. So sometimes you might want to restore a highlight. So I'll show you this process while it's wet. I'm going to rinse off my brush in water wipe it off on a paper towel till it's quite dry, and then I'm going to drag off a wet section of paint. So you can see that it has basically restored a highlight into my beetle. And then I'll just repeat that process until I'm happy with how much has come off. The next one I want to show you is when there's a big puddle or a pool in your beetle or on your surface, and you want to actually avoid those. But if by accident there does happen to be a big puddle or a pool, you want to rinse off your brush, wipe it off on a paper towel, and then you're just going to perform that same method again, where you just drag through the wet surface. What you can also do is rest, like if it is a big surface area, you can rest paper towel on top and it should suction up everything that you need. So I'm just sucking up the rest of this on my beetle. I'm just going to play with a bit of metallics into the wet and then let it dry. And then I'm going to show you how you lift off a dry surface. So my surface is still quite wet, and I'm just showing you how the metallic sort of disperses in water quite gently. It's not as big a bloom as you would see in the matte watercolors, but perhaps it's also this pigment. There's a bit of experimentation, so I always recommend having a swatching sheet next to whatever you're working on, so that you can experiment as you go. So just to show you how this bottom one has obviously got the wet into wet technique, and then on the beetle alongside you can see that there's a lot more control. It's over dry surface, so yeah, it's obviously not going to bloom out, and there's the layers that I would use for detail. Okay, I'm just going to use one of the gradient shifts that I showed you to demonstrate lifting when it's dry. So I've just got a damp brush and I'm just going over a section of paint to reactivate it. So watercolor obviously reactivates when it's wet, and you'll see that it's starting to loosen some of that pigment. So I'm going to rinse off, wipe off, and then just drag my brush through that to lift off any of the pigment that it has reactivated from that surface. Sometimes, according to the staining property of the watercolor that you use, this redemption is not as great. So this is quite a strong contrast that you see now, but sometimes there are colors that have a higher staining property and they won't let you lift too much off. Okay, we're going to move on to our first exercise. I'm not going to paint the whole butterfly for you, but I'm just going to get you started. You don't have to work in the same colors as I am, and this is also, I'm going to keep mine quite simple. Ultimately, this is where you get to have your fun and express yourself in your own way. So I have included a color reference sheet which you can refer to and just be inspired by some of the color palettes that each of these insects could come in, and obviously you can make it otherworldly even, but I'm going to keep this butterfly quite simple, just working in some blues, and then my intention is to keep these layers sort of lighter, just enough so that I can see the lines showing through, and then I will work a layer of a shimmer. I quite like the Bahamas and the Moonshine, so I might use a combination of that, but it's really just to set like an undertone, and then when that is all dry I'll go back in with a darker color. I think I'm going to use the violet today just because I know that's what's available in my well, And then so once everything is dry, I'm going to go in with the violet color, and I'm just going to bring in those fine line details into the butterfly. I do recommend just swatching out your colors so that you know what you're working with, even if it's just next to the color on the dot card. And you'll see that some of the colors work out to a solid metallic, where others, like Sunbeam, it's more of like a glitter molecule. The pigment molecule is a little bit bigger, so when you add water, it sort of applies like glitter would. And there's a couple colors like that on the dot cards. I just want you to pre-swatch them so you know what you're working with. And then just to show you the difference, I'm going to just do the wings quickly on the dragonfly in these more translucent, bigger molecule metallics. I think they would work quite effectively because their wings are naturally see-through. Working it in with like this moonshine, it just gives it a nice shimmer when you hold it to the light. And then you can always work in fine detail by painting a solid for the many different lines that make up the wing. On the workshop that I held recently, I was also asked the question about using a fine liner, and I'm all for it. Like, this is your way of expressing yourself. So if you would like to use a fine liner to bring in those fine details, go for it. I'm just going to have fun now and just paint in my surfaces with the metallics. So I'll let this just play through at real time, but I'm not necessarily going to speak. And then when I start adding the fine details, I'll just explain what I'm doing. Once this surface is dry, I'm going to paint in the fine lines using the violet. And with a very light stroke, I'm going to start working in fine line detail. I'm very happy to stop here with the demonstration and let you do your thing, but I quite like where this is going, and I may just finish up the butterfly with fine detail layers and then call that one a day. thank you so much for watching. You can find me on Instagram at heysweet.art or find me on Patreon as heysweetart.